Greg Carlwood, Mark Jaycox. If you look up my regression on YouTube, it will give you a good idea of who I am. I am a student time traveler, and I'm about to teach the whole entire world how to time travel. I altered time on 8/8/15 during the Barrett-Jackson automobile auction, and that's quite obvious. All you have to do is watch the Vegas auction, because it's different from every previous auction. You stop the movie, the 1951 movie, The Day the Earth Stood Still, at 8:42, center above Woman in the Black Hat, you will see my face emerge Agent Smith style from the one that is there. I'm in contact with the mystery satellite orbiting Earth. I was contacted after the 8/19/12 incident where my dream became a reality, and Whitley Strieber talks about it, and I actually predicted 8/19/12 with Ian Punnett months before on Coast to Coast Radio. I'm here because Chuck Burkhouse told me about a spider story, and I told the spider story on Coast to Coast early in 2012, where during my abduction, I was faced with 10,000 60-foot tall spiders.
The planet's puppet masters almost surely have a plan. There's clearly maybe something there beyond the realm of man. And until you've thoroughly tested every last close-trusted view, I find the more you think you know, the less you really do.
That's true, Dr. Zayas. Very well.
Where would we be without THC? 'Cause we know they're lying to us, just don't know to what degree. Yeah, where would we be without THC? The higher side chat show, Greg Carlwood and Company.
How's it going, higher side chatters? Drinking a little drink, smoking a little smoke, and getting my head right from sunny San Diego. I'm Greg Carlwood, and we know that of all the oddities and strangeness this world has to offer, one of the biggest mysteries is still the human mind. Whether we're talking about things like meditation, accessing higher forms of consciousness and ESP, or the potentially darker territory of hypnotic suggestion, subliminal messages, and mind control, it's obvious that many of the big curiosities of consciousness never find their way into our 9-to-5 reality. But today we have a guest who's been wading through these weird waters for a living nearly his entire life. Alain Nu is an author, lecturer, and professional mentalist that has made a career messing with the cogs of consciousness, much of which he talks about in his new book, State of Mind. The Man Who Knows reveals the secrets of mind over matter. A fascinating guy who might be pulling my mind strings right now, and by the end of the show might have us all bending spoons. The man who knows himself. Alain, welcome to THC.
I'm excited to be here, Greg. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, man, I'm psyched for this too. You know, we have a lot of consciousness explorers, psychonauts, new age dabblers, and scientists that talk about these kind of things, but I've never spoken to a mentalist before. And at first I was a little dismissive until I actually read the book, which I enjoyed a lot, and it really covers a whole lot of ground. But I think we should address this out of the gate, that there might be a preconceived notion that with someone from the realm of mentalism, we're just going to get parlor tricks rather than substance, because I know that might be on a few minds out there, and of course the two don't have to be mutually exclusive, but let the people know why mentalism should be considered more than just mind games for a cocktail party.
Well, you're absolutely right. I think that, what's interesting about mentalism is it comes from the world of the mystery arts, which in the broader perspective comes from the arts in the entertainment world. And so my idea behind mentalism is that oftentimes it's thought of as sort of just a fraud or a sham, or it's thought of as a way to, deceive you and to trick you into believing things that don't exist. And that's usually the first go-to place when people start to try to dissect where mentalism comes from. My idea is that, mentalism is really an art form, and just like all arts, it's a reflection and a response to reality. And we experience things that are strange and inexplicable all the time, sometimes through the illusion that reality presents to us, and sometimes through just the fact that reality does some strange things that we don't understand. So my idea is that mentalism is really just an art form that reflects that idea. And then my exploration is that if we actually explore it with an open mind that takes us beyond the entertainment aspect of what it means, does it give us something more to think about? And that's basically what State of Mind, my book, is all about.
Yeah, it really is interesting. It's stuff I hadn't really connected before, and it's kind of like magic, right? I guess you have your Siegfried and Roys, and then you have your Aleister Crowleys, and your John Dees, and your Lone Milo DeCats. But with mentalism, it seems like that line is a little bit more blurred, I guess, than it would be in, say, the magic realm.
Yeah, absolutely. I feel that Aleister Crowley and John Dee and all of those people who were really, I feel that Aleister Crowley definitely explored the realm of magic deception as well as the deeper aspects of magic, and it wouldn't surprise me that he had very similar thoughts that I would have on this particular subject. In just the fact that I think that there is a reality that takes place from the illusion of magic. And so you've got magic, which essentially is a duality between illusion and reality. And the bigger picture, I think, is that people believe that magic is just an illusion. And usually I'd say that the perceptual shift in our consciousness over the past, I'm going to say 200 years or so, is that magic is all just an illusion, that it represents everything that's just an illusion. But I think that takes away the much broader perspective of what the actual word magic means. I mean, magic is a word that actually has a much greater definition than just illusion or just entertainment or just for kids and or just fake. I think that there's a greater idea behind what magic is, and that if we were to explore the fact that it had this bigger definition before, and that perhaps we're literally looking at it with one eye closed and not realizing that there are other dimensions and other facets of the word to think about that are inexplicable and that will actually create miracles or shift reality in ways that can't currently be completely understood. I think that might bring us to a new territory in just the way we think and just the way we explore things and the way we might find new things out.
Yeah, well said. And kind of like you mentioned with it being a reflection of the reality. I mean, some people talk about reality itself being illusionary in nature, and definitely aspects of culture are illusionary, whether by design or coincidence is something we're always debating. But I mean, who's to say what is truly real?
Yeah, exactly. It's very, very, that is such an interesting idea for me, just because I'd say that 95% of the magicians that are performing out there really don't put too much thought to this idea. And these are the people who literally represent the word magic. These are people who should be magicians to their true right, and yet they really just explore this one little aspect of it, for children's parties, for fun and entertainment, to have fun with your friends. And I think that stuff is amazing too. I mean, I find that whole culture is an amazing little culture of people. I mean, I grew up in that culture. I know exactly who they are. I know, what they think about and how they think. And it's a whole subculture of people, just like paranormal world is their own subculture of people. But, what's funny about that is that there's a fellow by the name of Marcello Truzzi who kind of combines all of us. He was literally the founder of three big organizations, or one of the founding members of three big associations that study these types of things. I know that PsyCop and PEA kind of started at the same time. The Psychic Entertainers Association had Marcello Truzzi as one of their founding members. They are an association of entertainers who particularly focus on psychic entertainment and mentalism and hypnosis and stuff like that. And they are an amazing organization of people that consists of the best all over the world of these particular people. And they give awards away to people like Darren Brown and Uri Geller and people who they feel are leaders within the entertainment, the psychic entertainment world. Mm-hmm. Then you've got Marcello Truzzi was also the founder of the Society of Scientific Exploration, which was an interesting organization formed after he also founded PsyCop, which is the Committee for the Scientific Investigation for Claims of the Paranormal. So, I think that it's interesting that this one man who is really just interested in mystery and really just interested in the exploration of understanding what mystery and magic was all about. He was a professor of psychology at the University of Michigan and died just a few years ago, but very close friend of mine. And in my opinion, my particular vision rests on his interests in many ways that there is a bigger side to magic than just the entertainment factor, though we should consider the fact that there is an entertainment out there that does these interesting things, and how to explore that side of it becomes fascinating just because that is the side that actually, in my opinion, creates the capacity development for people who are interested in this sort of thing. And it kind of opens the doors, and it's sort of the doorway to saying to people, look at this, isn't this interesting? And shouldn't we think about this a little bit more? So I see mentalism and the stage hypnosis and stuff like that in many ways as sort of like the doorway to let you know that, there are powers of the mind that go far beyond reaching out into your hearts than just entertainment. It actually can change your life in ways that might surprise you if you actually thought about it a little bit more.
Yeah, that makes sense. And one big takeaway for me in reading about this stuff in your book is just how malleable and manipulatable the mind really is. I mean, it really isn't as hard as people might want to believe. Not that it has to be used in a bad way, but when you study the circuitry like you do, it seems like you start to see how the wires can be crossed and moved around a little bit. Is that kind of how you see it?
Yeah, I mean, I feel that everyone should feel free to explore these ideas, and so what my book does is it creates it just creates a bunch of games for you to play and try for yourself. And first, it'll teach you how to just amaze people and friends and family members with just powers of the mind tricks that are essentially deceptions based on how you might create the scenario and how you might put something in someone's mind, or implant an idea in someone's mind to make them think in a certain direction. And then, there are ways that involve math and mathematical formulas, and then there are ways that involve literally your own ability to be suggestible to people and to cause them to think in certain ways by planting a certain seed in certain ways, or giving them an idea that's more subconscious than it is conscious. And I think that I feel that these are explorations that a mentalist, who is just who's an artist interested in the art of mentalism, kind of explores on their own while they're trying to figure out ways to amaze their audiences. But I feel that as well, you can take these ideas, and by choosing certain ones that might appeal to people who are just beginning in the field, I think that you can create an assortment of explorations that they themselves can start to open up their own minds and start to see how this stuff can actually be used in a functional and mysteriously functional way.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and let me ask you about an area of modern society that seems to be using every weapon in its arsenal, and that's advertising. Obviously, they've been fine-tuning that machine for a long time, but do you ever recognize things in advertising or marketing that stem from things you might have studied as a mentalist?
Oh, absolutely. It comes in, and really, I feel that it really kind of starts to move into the realm of what is actually moral to do when it comes to these ideas of, if mentalism can manipulate the mind, if mentalism can make you, it can suggest certain ideas and implant certain ideas into your mind, then, is it moral to use mentalism? That starts to become the bigger question. And my feeling is that advertising does it just as really all industries use these ideas of how we use our mind and how we use communication and how we define certain words to make people think in a particular way. And so, in many ways, you can blame it on mentalism, but in my feeling, I think that all industries really do this, and advertising is certainly an easy example of how manipulatable we are through just the visions that they give us and the storyline that they give us, and how they can affect our minds and how they can affect what we want, essentially.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I mean, even on the simplest level, one of the tricks I've always liked is when someone says, don't think about an elephant balancing on a beach ball. And then, of course, that's the thing you think of. I mean, that, to an extent, is the control of someone's mind with a simple sentence. And the moral question is a big one. It seems like a fine line to me when you really get into this stuff. But where do you see the point where mentalism or some of these tools can cross over from compelling exploration of possibilities into the realm of things like nefarious mind control?
Well, I feel that nefarious mind control, unfortunately, is something that exists, and it's something that we have to be cautious of. I feel that the The nature of my book kind of lets you know that obviously you want to be able to use these ideas with as much responsibility and with as much open-mindedness as possible. But when it comes to things that involve nefarious mind control and stuff that involves whether or not somebody else is manipulating you, and how do you defend yourself against people like, the evil mentalist or the evil hypnotist that's trying to do the Manchurian Candidate on you. I feel that what you can do is, by simply understanding yourself, and what I get into in the book also involves things like deeper understandings of mysticism, things that involve the yin and the yang, and tapping into your own energy centers and stuff, like the chakras. These are all in many ways illusions, just because we don't really even have proof that they exist. They're illusions that are created in our mind that are formed by our own belief system. And what is interesting about that little idea is that it's an idea that empowers us to realize that we have control over ourselves, and greater control over ourselves than we might imagine. So when it comes to other people affecting us from the outside, when it comes to psychological bombardment of advertising and suggestions that are coming from outside of ourselves, I feel that understanding our energy centers inside of ourselves and understanding that kind of illusion within ourselves, it sort of empowers us to realize that we have the ability to know what's the difference between what is the right direction and the wrong direction. We have, in many ways, psychic ability to know what our best choice is. In fact, my first book, Picture Your ESP, was a book that came out in 2010, and it was all based on the question, do we have intuitive abilities over chance? And the scientific study has always been that, for better or for worse, man has an above ability over chance expectations to make the right decisions. So what I did was created 30 different challenges of various different things. So it might be things like, think of a color, or what color are you thinking of? Now turn the page and see if that color is within the photograph that you see it in, how dominant that particular color is. Or think of a texture, and we'll turn the page and see if this photograph denotes the texture that you're thinking of. Or think of an emotion, and we'll do this. And it kind of takes you through a little meditation and has you turn the page each time, and you just immediately know. And then it scores you against chance as to just how well you did. And my prediction is that, if you just read the book open-mindedly, you would find that you would have an ability over chance expectation to be able to know the right thing. So what's interesting about that is just that, going back to our original question, is that I think that intuitive ability within us is an empowerment that we have, or is it sort of an ability that we have that guides us through our lives. And what we need to do is just be honest with ourselves and realize that we do know the hidden answer, that our spirits actually know the answer to what is going to happen if we meditate and ask the question to our subconscious, and don't take things just purely off of just trying to make the right conscious choice, but just literally go into your subconscious and ask your own spirit, ask your own subconscious what you think the right idea is, and move in that direction. Now, I feel that artists oftentimes think that way already. I'd say that most creative people generally don't allow outside influences to affect what they think, and they usually just kind of go off and do their own thing. So I'd say that a lot of people already have that ability to do that just automatically. However, there are a lot of people who just kind of, I'm not going to mention any names, but certain family members of mine, just have a tendency to just follow the rules. It's just all about following the rules and just doing stuff that, when the telemarketer calls, pick up the phone and talk to them and give them the time of day.
Amen.
And I don't understand why they do it. I don't understand why they, choose to be affected by the television and telemarketers and advertising as much as they are. And it certainly keeps those guys in business. But I feel that if they were to just realize that there's a deeper way of understanding yourself, and it doesn't take much. It really just kind of takes your having to be concerned enough and to just not take everything that comes at you at face value.
Yeah, well said. And I guess by people strengthening those inner abilities and by learning the tools and tricks of the trade, you become less susceptible to them in the end. So, I mean, there's definitely value just from that perspective. But let's lighten it up a bit, because I kind of went straight to the darkness today. Jesus. But you do talk about a lot of the little mentalism tricks and tools that you've used over the years in the book. You outline several exercises, I guess, is what they could be called. They're very cool. Can you outline one of these little exercises for the people so that they can make friends at the bar and impress the ladies?
Yeah, let me think about one for a second. That would impress the ladies at the bar. This is an interesting exercise, and it's a very simple one, but I think that it's one that is worth sharing with other people, because you hear a lot about The Secret and you hear a lot about the law of attraction, and it's really kind of all about kind of wishing for things that end up happening to you. And I find it to be one of the most interesting things that you can do for yourself, just because, number one, it taps into your inner spirit. It kind of lets you realize that there's an inner visual aspect to your controlling reality that might actually control reality in a strange way. So if you want something, or if you desire something, and you feel that you need something, or that particular thing is the most important thing to you as of this moment, what you can do is summon that thing in your mind. And what I've done is, oftentimes when you read books like The Secret or watch the movie, you'll be told that you have to close your eyes and imagine those particular things and put those things in your mind and heart in a particular way. And what I did was I created an interesting one at the beginning of the chapter, which I call the outlaw of attraction. And the idea is that what you do is close your eyes, and obviously you will have a thing in your mind as to what you most desire, or the thing that you would like to have completed, or a question that you don't know the answer to. And you imagine a search bar in your mind, sort of like a Google search bar, except instead of the word Google around the search bar, you just kind of create an animation in your mind of all the things that you love, all the people, places, and things that you connect with and resonate with. And you allow those things to just float around the search bar, and really try to visualize those particular things as vividly as you can, just sort of floating around this search bar in your mind. And as you visualize those things and kind of cycle through each and every one of those particular things, again, people, places, and things that you particularly resonate with, things that you find important to you, things that come from your heart, you then type in the thing that you want, whether it be something that you desire, or something you desire to happen, or something that you have a question about that you don't know the answer to, and you imagine yourself typing that into your search bar. After that, you imagine yourself hitting enter, and then you'll see a list of links show up, just like you would in your computer monitor. But you'll just click on the top link, and you'll imagine that by clicking on that top link, a form of advice will come to you in the form of one or two or three words. And this advice is something that you'll remember, and something that you'll take into heart, and realize that you can use that advice for the future as you continue to meditate on this particular subject matter. Finally, at this point, you have nothing more to do, so you just breathe in and imagine everything entering your heart, everything that you've imagined, all of those things that you visualized floating around your search bar, all enters your heart, and you breathe out and imagine all of those things as you open your eyes, just sort of attaching itself to the reality that you now see in front of you. And then you're done. You've just basically planted the seed in your mind and in your heart and in the world, as to what it is that you want and what it is that you want to have done, and you hope that that thing will manifest itself in some way. And you've also been left with a little piece of advice that came from that top link in the form of one or two words, something that you can meditate on to see if that might inspire you towards getting what you want. And what I find, what's interesting about it is that I tend to, first of all, it's free, so you don't have to do anything or pay anybody in order to have that be done. It just takes a little bit of your own time to do it. And then secondly, what I find is that usually those one or two words, at least for me, that I get are words that kind of keep me patient so that I can wait for those things to actually take place. And what I find is that whenever I manifest stuff using that particular method, and I've done this now a few times since writing the book, it's kind of ironic because I haven't used that method until I wrote the book. I actually wrote the book, and basically when I was supposed to be done with writing the book, I had just finished that chapter. And I was kind of right. The book streamed out of my consciousness from beginning to end. Like I literally wrote the book from the beginning of the book till the end of the book without stopping. And so it wasn't a patchy way of writing it. I just literally wrote it from beginning to end. So this chapter happens near the end of my book, and it was right around the time that I had planned to finish writing my book, but I wasn't done yet. And so I still had like an entire part to write on the book, and I wasn't done yet. And at that point, I was pretty much out of money, and so I'd saved up all this money so that I could just basically spend time writing my book. And so as an artist, I live in this world in which I'm constantly moving up and down, above and below my my income level.
I hear you.
So now suddenly I've like literally drained out my entire income. I've got a wife and kid, and suddenly my wife gets really nervous about this, and she's like, we need groceries next week, and I'm not sure if we haven't just maxed out our credit cards. And so and so at that point I closed my eyes and I thought to myself, this is the time to use this. This is the time for me to use this prayer, and I've used similar things like this in the past, and it's always came to my rescue in certain ways. But this time I used this particular prayer. It was so weird because I remember typing in the word money into the screen, like feeling like an idiot about it too, because, it's like, is this really going to happen? Right. So
right.
I remember typing in money into the search bar, and then thinking to myself, okay, I need to be a little more specific here. So I just wrote money, and then I wrote now. I wrote money now because I don't need money next week. I don't need money next month. I need money now. Right? And so then I click enter, and when I click enter, I get my list of links, and I click on the top link, and one word that comes to me is the word patience, which kind of infuriates me because I'm mad at myself for having come up with that one word for myself, and yet it came from me, so I couldn't deny it. And at that point, I breathed in and imagined everything entering my heart, breathed out, opened my eyes, imagined everything becoming a part of my reality, which is really that's like my most favorite part of the actual experiment, is that when you do that, there is a weird feeling that something has changed, and you don't know how, but something makes you feel like something changed at that point. And so at that point, I felt like I couldn't do anything anymore, so I just continued living my life. And the next day, I'm with my daughter at the playground, and it literally took 24 hours. I suddenly get a call from one of my bigger clients, big financial institution, and the meeting planner literally says, Alain, I know this is last minute, but can you do a show for us tomorrow night? And I was just thinking to myself, as she said that, it was just ironic that, number one, it would be this one client of mine, because they're the only corporate client of mine that'll pay me on the night of my performing.
Wow.
Most of them take like a month to pay you afterwards, but they're the only ones that, I don't have a single corporate client that won't do this, that will do this, except for this one. So it just happened to be my one client who hadn't called me all year, but suddenly it was the next day after I'd made this prayer that they called me, and they asked me to perform for the day after. So I needed patience for 24 hours in order to get this money that I needed now. And so,
wow, man.
So that was pretty crazy. And I remember thinking, wow, that's pretty far out, considering that I did this the day before. And of course, I was also like concerned because, just because I have one show, it's not going to necessarily save my life. It's just going to take care of me for like a little while until the money goes out again. So at this point, I was pretty much broke. So it was strange that on my way home, driving my daughter back home from the playground, I get a second call, and my manager, the guy that you just spoke to, Clinton Billups, calls me up and says, what are you doing on November the 13th? And I'm like, nothing. And he goes,
Well, and you've got another big corporate event that's coming up November 13th, and that they want you for. And suddenly, like, my next month was taken care of as well. And then as I get home, and this is, mind you, I've spent since May. I was on a cruise ship from December through May.
Damn.
And so I'd saved up all this money while I was out on the cruise ship, because you don't have to spend any money while you're living like a hedonist. And so I'd saved up all this money. By the time I got off the cruise ship, it was like May. And so suddenly it was like May through October. I hadn't gotten any phone calls because everybody thought I was out in the Caribbean. And, I didn't bother to, because I was so busy working on my book, didn't bother to tell anybody that I was home. And so for me to get these 2 phone calls suddenly for like October and November, suddenly filling out my October and November, I was sort of beside myself, going, man, this is a crazy little wish that I made that actually kind of came true. And then within a couple of hours later, my manager calls me up again and says you've got this other gig. They want you at the Wynn in Las Vegas on December 6th. And suddenly it's like October, November, December, and I've got my entire year just mapped out for me at this point, and I'm ready to continue to write my book. And then later on, I got another one for January, but it literally took from that point until January for me to finish my book, and all I made was that one prayer wish after I'd realized my money had run out.
Damn, man, that's impressive.
Suddenly I made enough money to basically literally sustain me while I finished my book until January of this past year. Yeah.
Wow.
So that was one of the crazier things that happened to me as a result of literally just imagining the search bar in my mind and visualizing this thing to potentially happen. That literally felt to me like I was being ridiculous for even doing it. I mean, when you do stuff like that, it's kind of like, am I just acting superstitious and being stupid about this? But then when things like that happen, you just have to say, I have to say, like, it almost felt like it was trying to prove to me that it did exist by the way it kind of gave me by the way it manifested the answer for me,
Right. That's fascinating, man. It sounds almost more like neuro-linguistic programming, that exercise. It sounds kind of like NLP, but that is interesting. It's funny how it worked out like that. Yeah, you just had to have a little patience. Another interesting exercise that was in your book, a simple thing people could do when it comes to trying to harness their own psychic abilities, is this thing about the small to large coffee experiment. I thought that was a fun little thing I'm probably going to do every day for the rest of my life, really. But tell the people about that. Have you ever seen that work?
You know something? The most recent time that it happened to me, it was the opposite had occurred. Basically, I had ordered a large cup of coffee. I had ordered a large cup of coffee, not doing the experiment, and what they gave me was a small cup of coffee instead. So seeing that it can work in the opposite, it does kind of make me wonder whether or not it can actually work in real life. The truth of the matter is, I'm like such a huge coffee drinker that I always drink large coffees. But my friend Craig Browning swears by this, and it's his experiment that he kind of contributed to me. He's this amazing urban shaman and psychic reader out in the New England area, Western Massachusetts, and he swears by it. He says that he goes out and he visualizes. He asks for a small cup of coffee at the register, and of course you have to do this in a place in which you order the coffee and then wait for it to be made for you, and then he visualizes large cup of coffee as he orders a small cup of coffee and pays for a small cup of coffee, and as he continues to visualize it and visualize the fact that they're going to give him a larger cup of coffee, they will give him a larger cup of coffee. And the idea that I put in my book that kind of added an idea that I had decided to make part of it was the idea that, everything that we say, everything that we say and everything that we do is a reflection of us imposing our energy into reality. And so So the idea behind magic words is that our words contain the ability to shape people's thinking and shape people's thoughts and make people, form their own decisions. And at its most base level, that's what communication with words is all about.
Mm-hmm.
And so the idea of that you can actually use words that complement people and words that are positive to bring out the best in people is just that oftentimes we forget to be socially graceful in front of the people that we're around, and usually we're so caught up in our own lives that we don't bother to reach out to other people and make positive connections and stuff with the people around us. But if we did, how much more positive would our life actually be? I mean, could we actually find that things, manifest in much more interesting and surprisingly positive ways if we just used words that maybe affected people in a way that made them feel better? And so one thing that I oftentimes try to do is just simply find a reason that it's honest to compliment somebody by. I mean, it's oftentimes that if I'm out and about and I see somebody and I, think that there's something about them that seems distinguishing, I'll mention it to them, and it comes from the heart. It's not a fake compliment. It's just reminding myself that it's okay to say nice things to other people. And by doing so, you find amazing things kind of coming back to you in different ways. And so the idea on the coffee front is that after you visualize the cup of coffee, rather than just going off and hiding behind something and waiting for your coffee, you engage that person and say something nice to them about the day or about themselves or whatever. And by doing so, it'll just encourage them as you visualize that cup of coffee to make that cup of coffee a large cup of coffee.
I love it, man. That kind of stuff is so interesting.
Yes, these aren't the droids you're looking for.
Yep. Well, because of your job as a mentalist, it does seem like you've had some strange experiences. You talk about some of them in the book. Do people also come up to you? Are they more inclined to come up and tell you about their own paranormal experiences?
Oh, yeah. I had a great one just recently, as a matter of fact. I was performing for a Sunset Station casino in Las Vegas, and I was on my way out there just this past November, and I happened to sit next to a guy who was reading a book, and I'm always sitting next to somebody in coach that's just ignoring me and stuff, and somehow we end up talking, and I think he was because I was flying in from Baltimore to Las Vegas, and he had just finished doing this bike race marathon that he was part of, and he was a scientist. So when he found out that I just written this book, he goes, "Oh, I've got a ghost story to tell you about." And he told me the most fascinating ghost story. It was probably the best one that I've heard, and I'm going to try to include it in my next book probably. But basically, his wife had died about 3 years ago, and he had been married, for several years to this one woman. She died of a brain aneurysm. While she was in the hospital, he had given her a touch lamp that had like 3 different settings from dim to bright, and she would just have to touch it in order to turn it on. Eventually, while in the hospital, she ended up dying, and he ended up bringing the touch lamp back home. And so it sat on the bar on the first floor of his house. And he has one of those staircases one of those sweeping staircases that kind of comes down. And as you're walking down the stairs, you can sort of see this lamp on the bar. He said that ever since he'd brought that lamp home, that every morning when he said that first one day he was walking down the stairs, and as he's walking down the stairs, the lamp just turned on by itself in front of him and turned on to full brightness by itself. And so he thought that was a fluke, and he went over and he turned it off. But that it then continued to do that. It would just turn on to full brightness around him. And it would do it sometimes several times in a day. And eventually he started to make this connection that maybe it was her spirit connecting with this lamp. So that in and of itself is an interesting. It's strange to think that we as human beings will do that. We'll make these connections and we'll say, oh well, this lamp was with her during this time in the hospital. I mean, maybe there's some kind of connection. So so he starts thinking that this is her, and starts believing that this is her, and it will particularly do this as he's walking down the stairs in the morning. It'll either turn on. Sometimes if it's off, they'll be walking down the stairs. And he'll say, "Are you with me?" And he'll ask the air this question, and suddenly the lamp will turn on.
Damn.
And this isn't just a few times. This is every single day from the time that he had brought this lamp back home. Okay, so he's having this very strange relationship with a lamp for years at this point. So I mean, it's every single day that he's since she's died that this is happening, and multiple times a day. And, he mentions this to certain friends of his, and they ask him to plug it into different walls and stuff. And he starts plugging it into different walls to see if maybe there's something weird with the circuitry. And, it doesn't, still the lamp is doing the same thing. The other thing that's happening is that every time he even touches the lamp, it goes to full brightness. It never goes to any of the dimmer levels. So he starts to look into the lamp, and he takes the thing apart to try to figure out if there's something that he can fix about this lamp. But everything is normal, and there's no weird loose connections or anything like that. And so he puts the thing back together, and it still continues to do this thing. So the crux of the story comes around when he meets this woman. He lives in LA, and he meets this woman who's an actress, and she's a Jewish woman, and his wife was Catholic, who hung crucifixes all over the house.
Yikes.
So he meets this Jewish woman. I guess she becomes his girlfriend or something like that. But eventually she needs a place to stay, and he's got this house. So he invites her to come and stay in this house. And she comes into the house. And in fact, he even warns her. He says, look, you can come and stay at my house, but I'm just going to tell you that there's a spirit that lives here, I think. And, and you're just going to have to realize that this is happening. And so she comes in, and she's into crystals and pendulums and stuff, and she brings out a couple of her own tools of to see if she can connect with the spirit in the house, and apparently she does, and it doesn't seem to like her very much, right?
Mm-hmm.
But she's a pretty strong-willed woman, and she's friends with this guy, and and they have this relationship, and this newly formed relationship. And she says, "Look, I'm going to help you get your wife's things out of here," because he hadn't moved a single one of her things, none of her clothes, nothing was gone from the house. Mm-hmm. And so she says, "Look, I'm going to help you get all of this stuff out of the house." And so she starts packing all of his wife's clothes, all of his wife's belongings, and stuff like that. And they end up donating it to a Catholic Goodwill type of company.
Mm-hmm.
And basically, what happens is they get all of her stuff out. She takes down the crucifixes from the walls, and all of the stuff ends up getting donated to this Catholic Goodwill. And suddenly, at that point, the lamp went back to its regular 3 settings and never, ever turned on inexplicably again.
That's eerie, man. Yeah, I've heard nothing that extreme, but I've heard stories from people I know who have had someone very close to them die, where they just come back and they don't give a lot of details, but they just say, I am convinced that there is an afterlife now that someone close to me has died. And I don't know. It sounds kind of compelling. That whole realm of spirits, of course, in the realm of entertainment and magic, there are those mediums who claim to speak to the dead and sadly seem to be preying on people's moments of weakness sometimes. But do you think there is a real ability behind these maybe capitalistic motivations? Yeah,
I'll say this about people who speak to the dead. That's an interesting thing that has huge controversy for very obvious reasons. First and foremost, what you mentioned, that maybe it's just a capitalist way of preying on people who are grieving. what fascinates me about that subject matter is that it really is a reminder to me that America, and frankly, being an American, is all about taking old, ancient, mystical ideas and fusing them with your own current belief systems, be it Christianity or whatever. We moved from the old country to settle in what is now the United States of America because we wanted to practice a freedom of religion. We wanted to be able to understand a greater depth to our own beliefs and particularly the beliefs that the monarchy was forcing upon us and in telling us what was right and what was wrong and what was blasphemous and what was correct. And I think that when we moved to this country, there was a lot of experimentation. I mean, in Ephrata, Pennsylvania, there's the church that George Washington and Jefferson and Benjamin Franklin all went to that studied astrology. They had their own telescope.
Yeah.
There's Mormonism that sprang forth from, who's that guy, Smith, who, came from New York.
Joseph Smith.
Yeah, and that entire religion is based on a fusion of things like Freemasonry to, Rosicrucianism. There's some weird stuff in Mormonism that I'm not that familiar with Mormonism, though I live in Kensington, Maryland, just right next to the Mormon Tabernacle Temple, which is so Game of Thrones, man. It is. I drive by it every time, and I can't think of anything except for Game of Thrones.
That's funny. Yeah, I'm really fascinated with the early days of America. There seems to be all kinds of interesting things there. Even alchemy, it seems like a lot of the early guys had interest in alchemy and all kinds of esoteric mysticism and those kind of things. And it's kind of odd to think about that context because everybody knows that a big part of people coming to America was to escape religious persecution. And then you see what they were actually studying. And there are some real occult, esoteric roots to the foundation of America that you really can't get past.
It is really awesome to realize that, in my opinion, just because I've always felt quite the outcast for thinking the thoughts that I think. Mm-hmm. And never have I felt more patriotic to realize that the thoughts that I think actually come from founding fathers of this country.
Right.
So, with regards to spiritualism and understanding the roots of the spiritualist church, that's really where channeling the dead comes from. And I'm not sure of its exact roots or anything like that, but I know that it started to become very compelling in New York State with the Fox sisters and people who were, some of whom were entertainers who started to work in this realm, and a lot of them were kind of occultists and people who tried to connect with spirit through channeling the dead. And I think that what I find interesting about that is that your subconscious does so much and can exhibit so much, as many people have seen at college from stage hypnotists and stuff, causing people to transform themselves into things that they never thought that they could become. Things like that are. It's just interesting that we have this history that goes way back into this idea that we might be able to connect with people from the dead, and we can do this by searching within ourselves. And searching within ourselves, we find that we can actually tap into the spirit of that person, and that person can come alive within ourselves and start speaking. And I'm sure that within, similar to the world of magic and beginner magicians learning how to perform magic for the first time, they're very amateurish people out there who speak to the dead as well. And when you start to move into that realm, and you can see how people might see this as being outrageous and sort of like a scam artist that's preying on grieving people. But
I'd say that the spiritualist church is not based on scam artistry. I think that the spiritualist church is based on their belief that part of their worship is based on not forgetting the dead and not forgetting the spirit that the dead might have within yourselves, and that something might be tapped into, and that if you approach the subject matter from a sincere place and your intentions are pure and not capitalist and not the things that we are afraid of, but come from a genuine place, what might manifest from something like that?
Yeah, it is a curious question. And if there wasn't some underlying truth or possibility, the snake oil salesmen couldn't even do what they do. I think, yeah, maybe it is just a curiosity, but there seems to be enough substance there that I definitely think there is something possible there. Have you had any experiences yourself talking with any kind of spirits that seemed legitimate?
My weirdest experience that I mentioned in the book actually is this electronic voice phenomenon experience that I had.
Right.
With a couple of famous people, like, Chris Fleming is a famous ghost hunter. He's the host of Psychic Kids, which I think aired on Nat Geo, and this other guy, Donnell Rawlings, is a famous comedian.
Yeah.
And the three of us are sitting there at this bar, and I just ask him the question, tell me a little bit more about these weird electronic devices that you guys use. How does that all work? And I ask him that question, figuring that he's going to give me some information, but instead he just pulls out this machine and says, "Here, let's use it." So before I know it, we've got this machine on, and he starts, and all it is an AM/FM radio that scans through each channel, but within like 1 to 1.5 seconds at a time. So you'll hear static sounds like going. It's going like forwards or backwards on the AM or FM dial, and he chooses AM going backwards. So he says that's where he gets the most. That's where he'll get the most reception from. And I'm thinking, well, I'll have an open mind. I'll listen to it and see if this works. And I'm frankly quite skeptical of this as it's happening. And Donnell is frankly quite skeptical as well. So the best thing about it is that both Donnell and I are there, and I can actually feedback off of what I know Donnell is experiencing at the same time, because we're both laymen to this thing that's taking place. And Chris says, is there anybody out there that would like to communicate with us? And first he asks us to ask it a question, and we have no idea what to ask it. So then he says, there's somebody out there that would like to communicate. And within like 5 seconds or so, suddenly it just goes, yes, and it just continues. We both hear this word yes come so crystal clear that it was surprising. Like I literally had to do a scan across the room to see that nobody was like speaking through a walkie-talkie at us and stuff. And so I hear it say yes. We're riveted at this point. And Chris, just without missing a beat, goes, "We're not sure if that was just a coincidence, but can you give us a little bit more, like a countdown or some numbers?" And suddenly the thing starts spitting out numbers. It starts going 2, 3, 5, 7. It started doing this kind of weird thing where it wasn't like exactly they weren't numbers in sequence, but they were definitely things that sounded like numbers that were passing through. And it was happening it happened like in sequence in a way that it almost seemed like it seemed like if there was a coincidence, it was the perfect coincidence. And so at this point, I'm literally freaking out in my mind because I'd never ever experienced anything like this before in my life. And we're in Boston, and we're in the Sheraton, and it's a NACA convention. We're basically all there because we're there to sell our shows and our personalities to college students at this National Association of Campus Activities, and so we're at this bar, and this thing is happening to us, and I'm so surprised because there's people all around us, and it's a busy bar, and we're just doing this in a bar, and it's not like a quiet place, anything like that. We're not in darkness. So,
right.
so
it was just a very strange place to be experiencing this strange phenomenon. And so after it spits out numbers, he just looks up at Danelle and he says, "Can you tell us what his name is?" and points to Danelle. And Danelle just happens to have a very strange name. So, I mean, I was thinking in my mind, there's no way that this thing is going to say anything that's even going to be remote to what, to what his name is. And within 5 seconds, again, it literally goes, Don, and just continues going. And the thing says Don so clearly. And Danelle, who apparently his friends and family call him Don, is shaken by this experience. I mean, he is like, suddenly, like, he turns to stone. I mean, it was a really crazy, crazy moment where he couldn't believe that this happened. I think he actually stood up and just stood there like, what's going on, And again, it was one of the most, I mean, as far as coincidences were concerned, if I were to try to rationalize any of this, I would say that it would have to be a perfect coincidence. But it was just too perfect. It was just too perfect a coincidence. And so I shook his hand at that point and said, "Congratulations, sir. You just handed me my first on-demand paranormal experience." So Danelle has to leave. He can't stay any longer, and I continue to talk to him about all kinds of stuff like quantum mechanics and stuff, and how any of that might relate to what it is that we're experiencing right now, and find out that Chris really knows very little about the quantum mechanics of all of that stuff, and really knows more about, or seems to be more focused on, just what it is to manifest a ghost. And so then I say to him, "So how many spirits are we talking to here anyway?" And he goes, "Let's ask. How many of you are there out there?" And suddenly the machine, which was on the entire time, and I was listening to it while we're talking about this other stuff, it wasn't saying anything particularly fascinating or anything that felt like it was trying to communicate with us. But as soon as Chris said, "How many of you are out there?" it suddenly starts doing this thing where it's going, shh, yeah, shh, yes, shh, hi, shh, hey. And it was just like doing these weird things where like affirmations and salutations were coming out of this radio all of a sudden. And then he turns to me and he goes, "Sounds like there's like 4 or 5.
That's awesome.
And I'm just like thinking, this is so strange. It's like I've never, I'd never been hanging out with like I'd hung out with the ghost hunters before, but I'd never hung out with them and had them like show me their craft before. And so this was really fascinating, because not only were they showing me their craft, but it was working, and it was working incredibly well considering we were in this busy bar. And it suddenly dawned on me that, you don't really need to do it in a special place like a spirit seance or anything like that to be able to realize that there's stuff that's happening all around you at all times, and that if you just have an open mind enough to realize that you can communicate with these random things, you might find something interesting takes place when you do.
Yeah.
And this was certainly one of those moments where, I mean, and so what's funny about this is that I bought one of these things, and I've had it for years now, and I never talk to it. And part of the reason why I don't is because I feel completely ridiculous talking to this thing by myself. But one day I'll probably get some people together and we'll try to do like a little something.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, that is one of the stranger experiences that I've ever had.
Wow. Man, that would definitely trip me out if something like that happened. Now, we were talking about American culture and the esoteric, and I am curious because so often we get stuck in our own cultural bubble, especially as Americans, but since you are Chinese and Vietnamese, can you tell us anything about how magic, mysticism, and the occult are thought about in Asian cultures as opposed to the West?
I'm so American. I was born in California that it would be hard for me to do so without feeling a little insecure.
Fair.
About about real Chinese and real Vietnamese people actually thinking about these things. Through my own experience, however, I can say that my immediate family, that is to say, my mother and father and sister are pretty pragmatic and skeptical human beings, though my mom and dad are pretty fairly strict Catholic people who go to church every Sunday and stuff like that. They're really pretty skeptical and have always been more scientific minded in terms of believing in or disbelieving in ghosts or anything like that. I think if anything, they just want to ignore the fact that those things might be a possibility, just because it would just complicate their lives. However, my family outside of them are all people. Many of them are a little bit more interested in those types of things. I have an aunt who is really into mysticism and palm reading and tarot and stuff like that. Of course, I grew up in California, so when I was born in San Francisco, so I was literally born in San Francisco and was 5 around 1970 when it was just booming in terms of mysticism and the West Coast and the whole flower power fad.
Yeah.
And so there was a lot of stuff that was going on, and I got caught up in a lot of that at an early age, the age of Aquarius. But then we moved to New York. We moved to New York State, and of course, New York State, like I was mentioning, is also like sort of a hotbed of strange early settler mysticism and stuff like that. And so there were a lot of people in that area that were also had sort of influenced me in terms of just the things that they talked about and the way that they looked at strange and mysterious things. My dad eventually, when we moved to Washington, D.C., he ended up getting a job at the Library of Congress. Both my parents are librarians. That's what they library sciences was both of their studies.
Interesting.
And so my dad would bring home these books called Strange But True, or various different Strange But True type of books. A couple were written by a guy named Frank Edwards. Another couple were written by a guy named Vincent Gaddis, who was an exceptional writer in that field. And my love for strange phenomenon started at around the age of 7 from just reading books like that about things like the Loch Ness Monster and UFOs and ghosts and spirits and paranormal phenomena.
Yeah.
And so my interest in all of this stuff really came from just having these books being brought home by my dad. But later on, I think I found magic in the sense that, it just gave me a way it empowered me to create these illusions and stuff for people so that they could experience strange things as well.
Mm-hmm.
So it was an easy tie-in for me. Obviously, as I got older, my fascination for both of these realms never shifted, and I was very fortunate actually to have befriended when I was growing up. I grew up in Maryland for the most part in my early childhood, and by the time I was 13, I found this place called Dream Wizards, which was the strangest magic store in America, in my opinion, just because there are lots of great magic stores in America, and many of the greatest magicians sort of started off at these brick and mortar magic stores. These days, in the 21st century, I'd say that a lot of magicians actually start online. They learn magic from watching YouTube clips and stuff like that. In the early days, we had to discover a magic store or a magic book at a library and then start our journeys there. Mm-hmm. And so the thing about Dream Wizards was it was actually a Dungeons and Dragons store, and today it actually is considered the longest living gaming supply company in the United States. That's a brick and mortar supply company. Dream Wizards Magic Store has closed down for years, though. But when it first began in 1979, I'd walked into this place, and it was a D&D store at the front with role-playing games and stuff like that. Later on, it started specializing in Pokemon and other games. Then you start walking towards the back of the store, you end up in a science fiction bookstore area where it's just all sci-fi and fantasy books, and then like a few posters and arts from Boris and Frazetta and fantasy art people, and then you walk all the way to the back, and all the way in the back there's a magic store. Okay, so the magic store is actually hidden at the back of this gaming store.
Huh.
Normally, magic stores have a reputation based on its place, like where it is in the United States. So I mean, you've got magic stores in New York and Los Angeles, and Washington D.C. had Al's Magic Shop. There's But Dream Wizards was weird because this place wasn't really known for its location. Rockville, Maryland isn't like a really popular area of the world or anything. But the best friend of the owner, and the owner of the store was a really interesting person himself. His name was Mark Chervinsky, and Mark became the editor and publisher of Strange Magazine, which was a Fortean philosophy type of magazine, which collected strange data. And it ran for several years. David Lynch was a subscriber. I mean, we had lots of big name subscribers. And so I worked with Strange Magazine for a while as well. But Mark Chervinsky's best friend was a guy named John Kennedy, and not the president John Kennedy, but a magician by the name of John Kennedy, who at the time in the 1980s was really considered perhaps the most creative magician in the world. And so it was strange that I just happened to have stumbled on this one magic shop in the middle of nowhere in Maryland, and the guy who was sort of the magician behind the magic there was one of the most creative magicians in the world, and has since moved out to Los Angeles and is a magic consultant for movies and films and television shows and stuff, and does a lot of stuff like that these days. But he is known in magic for being just super creative, and I was his student, so I learned magic through him. But the interesting thing about John Kennedy that very few people know about, because most people see him as just an illusionist, as basically just a brilliant mind and an illusionist, a close-up illusionist primarily. But Mark Chervinsky was his best friend, and Mark was, a very, very intelligent academic person who loved the idea, who loved things like mentalism and Forteana and spirit seances and all of that stuff. And so I kind of grew up in this, my tutelage as a magician was actually formed by this duality between John Kennedy, who is a brilliant illusionist magician, and Mark Chervinsky, who is who really was fascinated in the realms of the unknown and strange phenomenon.
Yeah. That's an interesting path through this stuff for sure. Well, hey, we're getting close to the end of the road here, and when your manager reached out to me about being on the show, he mentioned a live spoon bending experiment with the audience, and I was really interested in this. So, listeners, go ahead and get a metal spoon if you can, or pause the show and go get one and come back, because we're going to see if anyone can bend a spoon with their mind, and Alain is going to guide us through this. I think it's a great idea to go out on. So please, man, walk us through this experiment, and we'll see if anyone out there has got the magic touch.
Well, the first thing that you'll probably want to do is go and grab a spoon. Just go to your kitchen drawer and find a spoon of any kind, but preferably something that you might actually be able to bend if you were to try to bend a spoon, just because they're different levels. So the guy who actually started the spoon bending party, they called it, was the guy named Jack Houck. I got a chance to meet Jack Houck back in about 2008, and he basically used to put people through an entire process in which they would actually bend metal just by bringing spoons to their event and making it happen. So what you'll do is you'll hold on to a spoon, and I don't know, Greg, do you have a spoon on you by chance?
I do.
Oh, beautiful. Okay, so what you'll want to do is put yourself in the state of mind by simply first just holding onto the spoon and knowing that you have the ability to actually bend metal. Literally knowing that you have this now. I'm not going to have you bend it yet, though. Just kind of feel it in your hands and close your eyes and just know that you are an energetic being who is capable of imposing yourself on reality in whatever way that you want, knowing that you have the ability to bend metal. And what you'll do is you're going to then simply take a deep breath And imagine as you exhale, your inner thoughts kind of moving towards the front of your mind, your inner thoughts being the part of your body and part of yourself who understands that bending metal is all about just bending reality and bending nature as you impose yourself on that nature. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to put you in a state of mind in which you'll literally be able to feel the ability to bend that metal. So what I want you to do is simply take a deep breath. Imagine as you exhale, your energy center is starting at the base of your spine, moving upwards through your body, slowly getting stronger and brighter, knowing that you can magnify the energy in yourself and bend nature just like you can bend that spoon. When I count to 3, you're going to just open your eyes and you're going to begin to chant the word bend, bend, bend. And all the while you are going to bend that spoon in this way and that way and every which way and see what directions it can actually move in. If you can bend it in one direction, see if you can bend it in a different direction. If you can bend it in a different direction, see if there's another part of the spoon that can bend. And what you're going to do is just continue to bend that spoon until it's all over and see what just happens. So starting at 1, take a deep breath, imagining yourself about to bend that spoon. 2, you're going to realize that spoon is going to bend whichever way you want. And 3, I want you to just open your eyes, take a deep breath, and say, bend, 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 and bend that spoon with as much force and as much effort as you can possibly bend it. See if the powers of your mind have the ability to actually change that spoon and move the direction of that spoon in whichever direction that you can. Keep bending it until you cannot bend it anymore. And when I say back to reality, we are back. 3, 2, 1, back to reality. Open your eyes, look at the spoon, and tell me if you see that spoon has bent. Now, if you're listening to this radio program, hopefully you'll be looking at a completely bent and gnarled up spoon right now. And if you would mind tweeting that to our show, or tweet it to me at Alain _Nu at twitter.com. I would love to see any photograph of your spoon. Did your spoon bend at all?
Mine didn't, but I didn't make it through my first 5K either. So I think my mind muscle needs a little exercise.
Well, we would definitely like to hear from any listeners who were able to do this. I try my best to deliver this experience in live programs and actually do a real good job of doing it in my live programs. I'm going to be on March the 3rd performing my show called ESP and Espionage at the International Spy Museum in Washington, D.C. So if you're interested in coming out and seeing a live program, I will be there on March the 3rd in Washington, D.C., again at the International Spy Museum in my program called the ESP in Espionage. Other than that, I perform regularly all over the country and all over the world. And if you're interested in bringing me out to an association or a business event, that is my specialty. It's what I do, and I'd love to be able to give you a more potent demonstration of this in a live performance.
Powerful, man. I love it. And I definitely am going to try to play that back and maybe try it a few more times. But definitely, if anybody was successful, let me know. You have seen success in doing these kind of large scale demonstrations?
Absolutely. In fact, just recently. Well, I've been doing this on the radio a lot also, and this is actually the first time. I wasn't sure how much time we had left, so I was a little concerned because the last time I did this on a radio show, my usual program lasts like the usual time that it lasts is about like 8 to 11 minutes or so, and so I think I went over time, and I got nervous this time, so I just kind of cut my induction a little bit short. But I would have to say that when you see me live, or if we had a little bit more time, hopefully maybe next time or something, we can work on it. And obviously, if anybody out there is interested in having me come out and do a live program for you in your hometown, I am available. You can find me at themanwhoknows.tv. That would be if you just Google The Man Who Knows, you will see me as a top ranking. So definitely do stay in touch, and I'm definitely eager to show what I do, and I'm on a mission to essentially
give the world a new understanding of what all of this means. And I'm hoping that more people will respond to what it is that I have to say.
Very cool, man. Yeah, well, thanks again. I really did love this. This was a serious blast. You educated me on so many different areas under the mentalism umbrella, and who knows if we'll ever really dial in on exactly what the mind can do, but it seems like it can do a lot more than people think it can, and I really appreciate your time, man. Take care of yourself out there.
Hey, thank you. It was so great meeting you, Greg.
Well, there it is, people. Alain Nu, the man who knows. I thought it would be pretty interesting to talk to someone who comes from a different perspective on some of these things we talk about regularly, and I couldn't pass up the opportunity to do a live spoon bending event. We can scratch that off the weirdness list for THC now, and a big thanks to Alain for facilitating that. But remember, it is not the spoon that bends, right? Also, a lot of Plus members have asked me to do a show about ghosts, and that's not really my forte. But I thought this was a good opportunity to get into a little bit of that too. And I hope some of you guys are happy with this bit of a departure from the norm. But in the second hour today, we got into the mindset of belief, the placebo effect, shamanism, psychedelics, Bill Hicks, synchronicity, biohacking, the field of neurofeedback, and hypnotism, and its use of the pendulum. Fun stuff. I've been really interested in the neurofeedback kind of thing. I hear that on Joe Rogan once in a while, and it dovetails into what we do. I don't know. The mind is a mysterious thing. But you know the drill. If you want to support my ongoing efforts here and treat yourself to twice as much show, go over to the highersidechatsplus.com and sign up for me. I got 4 more shows scheduled on the books right now, and if all these interviews happen as planned, I'm going to be very excited, and I think you guys are going to love these next topics. But until then, that's it for me. Your move, spoonbenders. Your frickin' move.
I put a spell on you because you're mine. The higher side spell on you. Watch out, I ain't lying. Nobody
the remnants of your melted mind, consider this. The high-quality, commercial-free show you just enjoyed is what we call THC-free. But you can spend twice as much time with Greg Carlwood and all his great guests by becoming a member of the Higher Side Chats Elite for just $5. And you'll get the 5 extended 2-hour episodes that come out each month. Because an honest, open-minded, and uncensored exploration into the fringe will never be brought to you by your corporate overlords, but rather must be funded by the loyal listeners willing to take that ride. So join at thehighersidechatsplus.com, and on top of twice as much show, get your own easy-to-use RSS feed URL for convenient listening on any device. Suggest guests on your member profile, comb through the archives of all the ones you missed, and continue the conversation even further on the new THC Plus forum, where you can scratch that higher side itch in between shows with the rest of us and hold your head up high, knowing that your subscription supports a show you love, produces the free version for everyone else, and stands as a small act of rebellion against those nefarious puppet masters of the power pyramid. Treat yourself. It's time.